The woman at the scissors stood with her back to the mirror, and her hands flat on her thighs, and did not speak while the hairdresser worked. It was 7:14 in the morning on a Wednesday in January, and the shop on Kwame Nkrumah Circle was not yet open for regular customers. But the hairdresser had agreed to come in early because the woman had asked the previous evening, and because she could see from the way the woman asked that it was not a small thing she was deciding. The braid came away in one length, 52 centimeters of it, grown over 9 years, thick as a rope and black as the inside of a good kettle, and the hairdresser held it for a moment before placing it in the white plastic bag on the counter. Then she cut the second one. Then the third. When she was finished, there were 4 bags on the counter, and the woman's head was close cropped, and the mirror showed her a face she had not seen uncovered since she was 27 years old. She looked at the mirror for 4 seconds. Then she picked up the bags, paid the hairdresser 3 cedis for her time, and walked to the salon on Osu, Oxford Street, where the owner had agreed to buy processed extensions and paid 940 cedis for the 4 bags, without bargaining. She had a school fees deadline at noon. What she did not know, what she could not have known, standing on Osu, Oxford Street at 8:03 on a Wednesday morning with her head bare and 940 cedis in an envelope, was that the son she was paying for would spend the next 17 years becoming the kind of man who would need to be reminded of her. She went home and tied a cloth around her head and made breakfast. Chidinma Nwosu was 43 years old and weighed 51 kilograms, which was 5 kilograms less than she had weighed when her husband Dubem drove a company bus to Abuja in 2009 and did not return. Not because he died, but because Abuja had someone in it that Tema did not, and he had decided the distance was an answer. She was 5 feet 2. She wore her 2 work dresses, one green, one brown, on alternating days, washing whichever she was not wearing on the evening of every second day in the plastic tub beside the bathroom door, wringing them by hand and hanging them on the line strung between the window post and the nail above the door frame. Both dresses were clean. She had been wearing them for 4 years, and both still held their color, because she used cold water and did not wring too hard, and because she understood the way people understand things that cost them, that care was the difference between what lasted and what didn't. In the drawer beside the kitchen table was a notebook. The cover had been blue once and was now a color between blue and gray from being opened and closed so many times. Inside, in Chidinma's handwriting, was a running record. Every amount she had spent on her son Kolade's education from the day he started school at 6 years old to the day he left for university in Accra at 18. The first entry was dated September 3, 2005. School sandals, 14 cedis. The last entry before the notebook filled was dated June 7, 2017, the day she paid the final installment of his first-year university fees, 280 cedis. Below that entry, she had drawn a single horizontal line. Below the line, in slightly smaller handwriting, was the total, 11,432 cedis and 70 pesewas spent over 12 years of her son's education. The notebook did not record the hair. She did not think it needed to be recorded. It was simply what she had done on a Wednesday in January when the envelope was short by 940 cedis and the deadline was noon. You did what you needed to do. The notebook was for the money. The hair was a different kind of accounting. Her one dignity in those 12 years was this: she never let Kolade see the notebook. He knew they had little. He was not a stupid boy, but she had decided early that he would not carry the weight of the exact figures, that he would eat his food and wear his uniform and do his work and leave for school each morning without knowing the arithmetic of what it cost for him to do so. This was not a lie. It was a decision about what a child should be asked to hold. On the mornings she was most tired, the mornings after the 14-hour shifts at the textile factory in Tama, when her hands still smelled of thread and her shoulders sat wrong, she cooked before she slept, so the food would be ready when Kolade woke. She cooked kenki and fried fish on those mornings. He ate it without asking why she was still in her work clothes. She had not cut her hair again after that January morning. She had grown it back over 3 years and kept it braided, and by the time Kolade finished university, it was almost as long as it had been. The day he left for a job in Lagos, she stood at the bus station on Tema motorway at 6:48 in the morning and held his face in both her hands for 3 seconds. The way she had held it when he was small, and then let go. He looked back once. She waved. He got on the bus. That was 7 years ago. In those 7 years, Kolade and Wosu had gone from a junior analyst position at a logistics firm in Lagos to an operations director role that paid a salary she could not have described in numbers she was familiar with. He had moved from a shared flat in Surulere to a 2-bedroom apartment on Lagos main island. He had acquired the manners of people who spent their time among other people with money, the particular economy of words, the way of letting silences sit, the habit of receiving rather than asking. He called her every Sunday at first, then every other Sunday, then on her birthday and at Christmas, and sometimes a month would pass without a call, and she would sit with the silence of that the way she had sat with every other silence in her life, not collapsing into it, just making room for it. She did not call him. She had decided she would not be the kind of mother who called when her son did not call. She would be the kind of mother who was there when he came. She waited. The waiting was not passive. She had never been passive about anything in her life. She waited the way she mopped a floor, covering every section, leaving nothing unattended, finishing what she started. She sold second-hand clothes at the Tema market on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. She paid her rent of 230 cedis on the 2nd of every month, in cash, in an envelope, which she slid under the landlord's door before 8 a.m. Because she had found that people who paid before they were asked for payment were treated differently from people who paid after being reminded. And she was not interested in being reminded. She bought provisions on Fridays at the Tema market, the same provisions she had bought for 30 years, from the same 3 stalls in the same amounts, because she knew what she spent, and she spent what she knew. On a Wednesday in February, 6 months after Kolade left for Lagos, she went to the secondary school where he had studied to collect a form for the Education Welfare Office. The woman behind the window at the school fees counter was a young woman in her mid-20s who wore a red lanyard and looked at Chidinma's green dress before she looked at her face. Her name tag said Comfort in black letters on white plastic. Chidinma explained that she was collecting a form for her records, a proof of completion for her own files. She had kept every receipt and every payment acknowledgement from 12 years of school fees, and she was organizing them. Comfort looked at the ledger on the desk. She said, without looking up, "We don't give out those forms to people who didn't complete the fee schedule." Chidinma said, "I completed every payment." Comfort looked at the screen. She typed something. She said, "There is a note here about a late payment in March 2014. Chidinma said, "I paid that in full in March 2014. It was 12 days late. I have the receipt." Comfort said, "The system shows a flag." She did not look up. "You'll need to speak to the accounts manager." The accounts manager was not available that day. He was not available the following Monday either, because he was at a workshop in Accra Central. His assistant, a man named Kwadwo, who wore a name tag that said Kwadwo Mensah, accounts deputy, apologized and offered to leave a note. He left the note. Chidinma returned the following Wednesday, and the accounts manager reviewed the record and confirmed the payment had been made, and the flag was a system error, and issued the form, which he stamped with the school seal and signed with a signature that took 4 seconds and required from him no acknowledgement of the 3 weeks it had taken to produce. She walked back to the market on the main road rather than taking a trotro, because it was 40 minutes on foot and she had the time, and she preferred to think while she moved. The harmattan was in by then, and the dust was the kind that settled on the tops of parked cars and in the creases of dark clothing and at the back of the throat. She walked through it, without raising her wrapper over her face the way some women did. She simply breathed through the dust, the way she breathed through everything, which was steadily and without making a production of it. She put the form in the blue notebook when she got home. She did not tell Kolade about the form or about comfort at the counter or about the 3 Wednesdays. On the first Tuesday of March, a woman named Amma Bright, who sold tomatoes at the Tima market and had been selling tomatoes at the Tima market for 23 years, and who knew more about more families in that neighborhood than anyone who held any official position, sat beside Chidinma at the market where Chidinma sold second-hand clothes on 3 days of the week, and told her, without preamble, that she had seen a photograph of Kolade and Wosu in a business magazine at her nephew's office, and that he was listed as one of 40 under 40 business leaders in West Africa, and that his company, a logistics technology firm he had co-founded 2 years ago, was valued at something the magazine expressed in American dollars. Chidinma listened to this. She arranged 3 blouses on the rail in front of her. She said, "Thank you, Amma." Amma Bright looked at her for a moment. Then she said, "He has not called?" Chidinma said, "He is busy." Amma Bright looked at the blouses on the rail. She was 61 years old and had known Chidinma for 19 years and had watched her walk from the bus station after Dubem left, and had watched her go to the textile factory, and had watched her sell the hair, and had said nothing about any of it except to be at the market the next morning, the same as always, which was the only thing Chidinma had needed from her. She said now gently, "You should call him." Chidinma said, "I will wait." Amma Bright said nothing more. That night, on a Tuesday in March, Chidinma sat at the kitchen table with the blue notebook open in front of her. She had taken it out not to read it. She did not need to read it. She knew every figure in it. But because sometimes the physical presence of a thing is more honest than a thought. The kitchen was quiet, in the way it was quiet at 9 p.m. in that compound, which was the neighbor's television through the wall. Low, a program she could not identify, a dog somewhere on the street that barked twice and then settled, the sound of her own breathing. The gas ring was off. She had eaten rice and garden egg stew she had made on Sunday and reheated, and the pot was drying on the rack by the window. She was thinking about the business magazine photograph she had not seen. She did not have a way to see it. Her phone was a Nokia that Kolade had sent money for in the 2nd year he was in Lagos. Not a smartphone, just a phone, for calls, which she had not asked for, and which she used mainly to receive calls from Amma Bright and from the landlord, who preferred to call rather than leave notes. She did not know what Kolade looked like at 31. She could approximate it from the memory of him at 24 when he last came home for Christmas, adding 7 years to the set of his jaw and the width of his shoulders in the way that mothers do, instinctively, building forward from the last known version. She closed the notebook. She thought about what it cost her landlord, the man downstairs, to raise the rent last November by 15 cedis without notice. She had paid it. She had not said anything about it to Kolade because she did not call Kolade, and because 15 cedis, while not nothing, was not a crisis. It was the cost of 2 blouses at the second-hand market, which she could absorb by buying one fewer blouse per month to sell and adjusting her stock accordingly. She thought about the school fees counter and comfort in her red lanyard. She thought about the dust on the road on the walk home, the harmattan settling on her wrapper, the way her throat had felt for the hour after she got in, dry in the particular way of harmattan dust, which was not the same as being thirsty, but which no amount of water quite fixed until you slept and started again. She put the notebook back in the drawer. She went to bed at 9:31 and she lay on her back and she did not count anything. She simply waited for the morning, which always came, because the morning was the one thing she had always been able to rely on. If what Chidinma was carrying in that moment is hitting you the way I think it is, the weight of having given everything and then waiting quietly for what it would produce, I need you subscribed before we get to what arrives at her door. Because what comes next was not what she was waiting for. And what she does with it is the whole point of this story. What arrived was not a phone call. What arrived was a white Toyota Land Cruiser at 4:17 on a Saturday afternoon, parking outside her compound on the street where she had lived for 21 years. Then a second vehicle, also white. Also a Land Cruiser, parking behind the first. 4 men got out of the vehicles who were not Kolade. They wore dark trousers and light shirts, and they stood by the vehicles and looked at the compound entrance the way people look at things they are assessing. Then Kolade got out of the second vehicle. He was 31 years old. He had filled out across the shoulders in the way that men fill out in their late 20s when they eat properly. His agbada was the color of good ash, pressed flat and perfect. He wore shoes she did not recognize the make of. He looked at the compound entrance. He did not look at the street. He did not look at the window of the house 3 doors down where old Mr. Asante had pressed his face to the glass the moment the vehicles stopped, because vehicles like that did not stop on that street, and everyone knew it. Kolade walked through the compound entrance. Chidinma was in the kitchen. She heard the vehicles. She heard the footsteps in the compound. She did not go out. She stood at the kitchen counter and pressed her hands flat on the surface, and she waited. And when the knock came on the door, she waited 4 more seconds before she opened it. She opened it, and he was standing there with his 4 men visible behind him in the compound. And he said, "Mama." She looked at him. Then she looked at the men in the compound. Then she looked at him again. She said, "Come in." Then, quietly to the men, "There are chairs in the compound." They did not move to the chairs. She had not expected them to. He came inside. She closed the door. She set water to boil, and he sat at the kitchen table, the same table that had been in that kitchen for 14 years. And he was too big for the chair in the way that people who have grown into a different kind of life are always too big for the furniture of the life they came from. She could see him taking in the kitchen, the gas ring with the replaced knob, the window with the repaired latch, the iron on its corner shelf wrapped in cloth at the handle, and she could see him calibrating something, though she could not read what. He said, "Mama, I should have come sooner." She said, "The water is boiling." She made 2 cups of tea and set one in front of him and held hers and sat across from him. He looked at her hair, braided, as it had been the last time he saw her, and he looked at the green dress. He looked at the kitchen. He said, "I want you to come to Lagos." She said, "I have the market 3 days a week." He said, "Mama," his voice did something in the middle of the word. "I have a house on Main Island. You could have the whole upper floor. You would not have to." He stopped. He started again. "I did not do right by you these years." She looked at him over the cup. He put his hand on the table. "I am going to fix that. I have money now. Real money. I want to give you something back for what you gave me. He looked at the kitchen again. He took a breath. The iron with the cloth on the handle. "Mama, you don't have to." She set her cup down. He stopped. The iron had been on that shelf for 8 years. It was the same iron she had used to press his university shirts before he left. It was the same iron she had wrapped at the handle herself, in a strip cut from an old head wrap, because the crack had appeared the year he was in his 2nd year of university, and she had not replaced it because she had needed the money for other things. He was looking at it the way people look at evidence of something they had not prepared to see. She let him look at it. Then he said, "I am sorry, Mama. I am sorry I did not come. I cannot." He put both hands on the table. "I want to fix it." She heard the word fix, and she knew what was coming next. And what was coming next was not wrong, not unkind, but it was not what the situation required. Money would come out. Figures would be discussed. The main island house would be described again. Plans would be made. And all of it would be arranged around a version of what had happened between them that did not include the full cost, because he did not know the full cost. And without the full cost, what he was offering was not repair. It was renovation. A different thing entirely. She said, "Colade." He stopped. She went to the drawer. She set her cup down. She went to the drawer beside the kitchen table, and she took out the notebook. She had not opened it in 7 years. The cover was now the color of a sky just before rain, that in-between gray that is not quite any color at all. She placed it on the table in front of him. He looked at it. He did not touch it. She said, "Open it." He opened it to the first page. He read the first entry. September 3rd, 2005. School. Sandals. 14 settees. He turned the page. He kept turning. She watched his face while he turned the pages, and the face did what faces do when they encounter something they were not prepared to encounter. It went very still. Then less still. Then still again. In a cycle that took about 2 minutes, which was how long it took him to reach the last page with writing on it, and the horizontal line, and the total. 11,432 settees and 70 pesewas. He sat with the notebook open. She said, "The notebook doesn't have everything." He looked up. She told him about the hair. She told it the way she told most things, plainly, without decoration, with the exact amounts: 4 bags, 940 cedis, the hairdresser's 3 settees for her time, the school fees deadline at noon. She told him the date. She told him how she tied the cloth around her head afterward and made breakfast. He did not speak for a long time. Outside, one of the men coughed in the compound. A motorbike passed on the street. The afternoon light through the kitchen window had gone from direct to sideways, the kind of light that means it is past 5 o'clock. His hands were on the table, and they were not moving. She said, "I am not telling you this so that you will feel something you cannot put back. I am telling you because you said you did not know what you could give me back. Now you know what it is you are talking about giving back." He said, "Mama, I did not know." She said, "I know you didn't." She picked up her cup. That was the point. He was quiet again. Then he said, "What do you want? Tell me what you want." She looked at him for a moment, her son 31 years old, too large for the kitchen chair, with 4 men waiting in the compound, and money she could not count in units she was familiar with, and all of it built on a foundation he had not been allowed to see the price of. She said, "I want you to come home on Sundays." He blinked. "Not every Sunday," she said. "Not as a rule, but when you can. So that I know you remember the way here." She set the cup down. "The rest, the house on Main Island, the money, whatever you want to arrange, we can talk about that slowly. There is no deadline. He looked at her for a long time. Then he said, I will come Sunday. She said, Good. She stood and took both cups to the sink. He came on the following Sunday, and the Sunday after. By the third Sunday, the Land Cruisers were still there, but he had told two of the men to wait on the street, and only one came into the compound. And by the sixth Sunday, he came alone in a car she did not recognize, but that was smaller and quieter than the Land Cruisers. And he sat at the kitchen table and ate the kenki and fried fish she made, and they talked for 3 hours about things that were not the notebook and not the hair, about the business, about the people he worked with, about a problem in the supply chain he was trying to solve that kept him up past midnight. She listened the way she had always listened, without interrupting, and when he was done she said 2 things that he wrote on his phone before he left. He started calling on Wednesdays as well. Not long calls, 12 minutes, 15 minutes. Long enough. In April, 4 months after the Saturday with the Land Cruisers, Kolade and Wosu made a donation to a secondary school bursary fund in the Tema district, not the school he had attended, but the one nearest to the market, where his mother sold second-hand clothes 3 days a week. The fund covered school fees and uniform costs for children whose mothers were sole providers. It was structured to run for 10 years and reviewed annually. It was not named after him. The administrator of the fund, when asked by the headmaster at the first disbursement ceremony what name to put on the certificate of contribution, relayed Kolade's answer exactly. Put the name of whoever it is that needs the help. The first disbursement was made on the 3rd of September, which was the date of the first entry in the blue notebook, September 3rd, 2005, school sandals. 14 sedis. He had read the notebook closely enough to remember the date. He had not told his mother he remembered it. She found out from Amma Bright, who found out from a cousin whose daughter attended the school, on a Tuesday morning in October at the Tema market, while Chidinma was arranging blouses on the rail. Amma Bright said, Your son. Chidinma looked at the blouses. She said, I know. She did not say what she knew, or how much of it, or since when. She continued arranging the blouses. She smoothed each one across the hanger the way she had always smoothed things. Carefully, with attention, as though the task in front of her was the one that mattered most, which was the only way she had ever known how to do anything. The world measures sacrifice in the moments it can see. The uniform bought at the start of term. The school run. The birthday cake. What it does not see, what it almost never sees, is the Wednesday morning at 7:14, when a woman sits with her back to the mirror and makes a decision that will not be written in any notebook, and will not be spoken of for 17 years, and will not be understood, until a son sits at a kitchen table too small for him, and turns the pages of a life he had been allowed to live without knowing its cost. What she carried was not resentment. It was not leverage. It was the arithmetic of love, done quietly and without witness, in the only currency she had available. Hair, thread wages, 2 dresses on alternating days, kenki on mornings when her hands still smelled of the factory, 14 sedis for sandals, 940 cedis for a deadline at noon, 11,432 cedis and 70 pesewas, and the item that did not fit on the page. You cannot undo what a mother paid to build you, but you can stop. You can sit down in the small kitchen and open the notebook she never showed you, and let the pages tell you what you have been walking on all this time. And if you are paying attention, if you are actually paying attention, you will understand that what she gave you was not her hair or her wages. It was years. Quietly, without asking anything in return, she gave you years of her life, and arranged them so that you would not feel the weight of them. That is what a certain kind of love looks like. It is very easy to miss. And on a Sunday morning in Tema, with Kenki on the table and the kitchen window light going sideways and one of his phones on silent for 3 hours, Kolade and Wosu sat across from the woman who had done all of it, and he understood. Not all at once, but in the accumulating way of honest things, that coming home was not charity. It was the only payment she had ever asked for. If your mother, or someone who raised you, spent years paying costs she never told you about, if you found out later what it actually took, what did you do with that information? Did it change how you moved through the world? Leave your answer in the comments. I really want to read it. Subscribe for more stories about the sacrifices that don't get recorded, the love that doesn't announce itself, and the people who give everything quietly and ask for very little back. I'll see you in the next one.